Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the Better You podcast, uh, sponsored by Lamco Wellness. I'm with Robbie Batani and Ali Bailey, and today we are talking about motivation, specifically what works, what doesn't work, some of the myths we might have heard. Hopefully, we're going to dispel some of those, as well as potentially give everybody some tips and tricks in terms of what they can do to be more motivated. Um, so to start things off, I think one of the biggest myths that I see is that it's a willpower thing. Um, Willpower absolutely plays into it. There's always that last little push that you have to generate, but so much of it, I think, um, is setting yourself up for success. Motivating yourself in ways where you're excited to do the things that are productive for you and you're not as excited to do the things that are not productive for you. Um, and that can vary, I think, from day to day, where there's some days where I'm like, oh, I can do everything and I feel really good because I got a bunch done. And then there's other days where I'm not doing anything. Like hopefully I do my morning stretches and evening stretches. But yeah. I know, Robbie, you're really good with keeping yourself motivated, so I want to hear your thoughts on this.
No, I think what you mentioned was on point in regards to. I feel like motivation it differs to topic and situation to situation, um, and we're in the society of like you're motivated or you're not. Like you're a go getter or you're just a lazy whatever you are, right? Um, but I feel like from my end, at least personally, just I like doing the routine stuff that motivates me.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
so it makes a lot of the things much simpler to be motivated about. As learning about being with Lamco, learning about the human mind, how it connects to everything in the world. Talking to Ali, talking to you, talking to all the amazing psychologists that we have, and all the guests that we have on the podcast. So I think that's also a motivation to learn more, rather than held back on, okay, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to enjoy this. Um, so I think that's where I'm at.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that certainly because motivation it differs between people, right? So it's funny, I was just at a lunch recently talking about this with my mom and she's like, "You do so many things and you're so busy and how do you find the motivation? Like, what is it like for you?" And I said, "Well, for me, it's one of those things where I don't really think about what I'm doing because again, I'm a very busy type of a person in the gym, working, out walking a lot. Like I just do it. And if I sit and think about, what makes me motivated, I'm one of those people where I don't want to say it unmotivates me, but it kind of puts that shock of like, wow, like I really do a lot. Like, my dog, we walk at least 2 miles a day. I'm in the gym a couple hours. So it's like if I stop and think about what I do, it like makes it more real that I'm doing it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It's also the subject, right? In that sense, like if you're given in the like, oh, you have to wake up in the morning and then take a math test, you're not going to be excited for that. There's going to be no motivation, rather than like you and your love for going to the gym would be like, okay, I'm excited for to waking up, and that's my motivation to keep going, because it makes you feel good, right? Dopamine will definitely factor in the motivation spectrum.
Brought up a really good point with that, Ali, that it's a it's a trick my wife and I use when both of us get hit by a lack of motivation. Is we'll just repeat to each other, don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. And like it's hugely effective for me and for Ashley. I don't know if it's effective for everybody else, but when you just start the physical action of doing whatever you need to do, without thinking about how huge it is or how many other things you have to do, the work just kind of carries. Um, and I think that that's a huge inhibitor to motivation for a lot of people, is that they have so much to do. Like Robbie was talking about how he has a routine and he loves sticking to his routine. So I'd be willing to bet that for you, it doesn't register in your head that this is an additional thing to do every day. It's just what you do every day. So it's normal. And I think that that escapes a lot of us, is that it's a lot of what we see as people having a lot of motivation. Please correct me if you have, or push back if you have a difference of opinion. But a lot of what we see as motivation, um, is really just the progressive building of positive habits and routines that we can stick to. And I think that a lot of people tend to look at, Ali or Ravi or people like that as like, oh my gosh, you're doing so much, you're doing so much. And I would be willing to bet, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would be willing to bet that you didn't just one day wake up and go, okay, I'm going to do all of these things that I'm doing. You did a few more things and it became routine. And then you did a few more things and then it became routine until it's like, hey, this is normal and this is part of my life.
That's very true. I feel like that with that, it also comes with the reward system, right? You do something over and over again, you're gonna get it, right? It's just gonna take time. So I feel like as a if you're a child, like how do you prep them to be motivated? You either give them a candy or some type of sweet, right? Like, hey, eat your veggies first, and then you'll get a reward of it's a motivational factor of like, okay, hey, you'll get to have some ice cream before bedtime. So I feel like reward system is also a big key in the motivation that we're talking about at the moment. So Ali, what are your thoughts on that? Psychological, does reward system works for a kid or not?
It can. So for kiddos, as we know, the positive and negative reinforcements, right? So if you do your homework, you won't have to eat any or as many veggies, or you'll get, extra TV time, tablet time. I know a lot of parents say, you can only get a couple hours in the evening or on the weekends to be able to play on, Roblox. So I definitely think that they work, but making sure that, maybe the kiddo or even the person is doing what they're needed to do, right? So I know myself, like if I'm sitting doing something and I'm thinking about the dishes in the sink or laundry that has to get put away, like I can't focus until that's like my motivating factor, is to get whatever the chores done so that way I can come back and just have a free mind and focus and concentrate. Whereas for kiddos and parents, right? Like the reward sometimes can just be so, I don't want to say over motivating, but it's like I need to get this done so that way I can have the rewards. So it can kind of be a catch 22, I think, depending on the situation, depending on the person, what their motivation is. Is their motivation not to eat vegetables, or is it to be able to play on the game?
Brings up a really interesting point that I've always thought about, which is like the negative effects of using motivators. Like for instance, we were talking about kids, and if you're using like ice cream, for instance, as a motivator to do their homework or whatever, are you creating an unhealthy eating habit? You know? Um, and I think that's something we also don't consider when we talk about motivation, is the possibility of negative motivation. I think when we were talking about high performance and athletics and everything, we talked about how rage can be a huge motivator for high performance, but at the same time, you probably shouldn't be angry all the time. You probably shouldn't be lashing out and rage filled all the time. I think that's going to be an issue in your day-to-day life. It's tricky.
Unless you're Hulk, he's angry all the time.
Unless you're who?
Hulk, just.
Yeah, that's the secret. He's always angry.
I feel like on that note, like there's different types of motivation, right? There's the extrinsic, right? Ali, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you know any of that, or Aaron? And then on the other side is
intrinsic and extrinsic.
Yeah. So
do
you guys have any ideas on both of them and how they relate to the motivation?
I'll let you go first because you actually know what you're talking about, Ali, whereas I just have opinions.
Well, I mean, I think, without having any definitions or anything in front of me, like I kind of say intrinsic is, within us, right? And extrinsic is based on what's outside of us. So everybody can have one of the two or both, right? Like, so there might be motivating factors that somebody has within for why they're doing something or why they may want to do something, but then also have the external factors as well. I always see it as like internal and external. So, maybe for example, for somebody to meet goals that they have for themselves, right? Like we looked at the intrinsic, and then for the extrinsic, like if somebody has a family, if somebody is working toward a goal and other people are watching them, like an athlete, for example. And I always go back to like the recent NBA, right? Like Jalen Brunson, he had a lot of external fans, rooting him on. So not only was it an internal goal for him to win the championship, but also motivated by his fans and family and loved ones. So that would be my best real life example of that. But everybody has their reasoning for what they do and why. Their why, really.
I feel like the challenges. Oh, go ahead. Oh, never mind. I feel like the challenges with intrinsic and extrinsic motivation are a little bit different. I feel like if it's an intrinsic motivation, you have to make sure to balance it out, like to balance out your internal motivation. Otherwise, you get really weird and unhinged potentially. And with the extrinsic motivation, you kind of have to ask, okay, well, how am I going to keep going if hypothetically my external motivator is gone? And those are, I talk about this all the time, like with everything, there's a trade-off. I think that with the intrinsic, you don't have to worry about losing that motivation because it's internal, it's something that you've created, but you do have to worry about going too far. Like I don't know if you've ever seen movies or people in real life where they're just fixated on a specific result to the point where they're just kind of weird about things. And I'm being very nice when I say just kind of weird about things. But I feel like that's what happens is they've internalized that motivation to get a specific result to the point where it's become unhealthy, you know? And now they're fixating and it's an obsession rather than motivation. Versus, if you have an external motivator, what happens if that disappears? Like, I think that we talked about a lot about, Michael Jordan's competitiveness, which worked out great because he could always compete against another person or another thing or something else to compete against. But hypothetically, let's say, I just want to beat this one person because they always beat me and I want to beat them. What happens when you beat them? Are you going to keep going or are you going to be like, mission accomplished, I'm done, I don't have any motivation for this anymore? So I think it's like with a lot of things, there's always a balancing act and there's always a catch for it that you have to consider.
I feel like you also have to find a middle ground between like a person who has a growth mindset, right? When a kid is young, like do you keep telling them, oh, hey, like you're doing amazing, like you're the best, you're the top of the class, you're top of the world, whatever it is. And I feel like they're at that moment, they're going to have a fixed mindset, right? And then sometimes it can be demotivating in terms of oh, I can just relax. I don't have to do much more or be better, you know. Um, so, Ali, a question for you in regards to that. Like, is there a scientific conception with decreased motivation in students?
And is this just like
Just having a
general
goal, yeah,
student?
general student, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on the age group and the grade of a student, right? So like I think when we're in college, we're at the higher level, and maybe we're paying our own student loans or paying out of pocket for our own courses, like there's a motivator right there. Like I can't fail because then I'm gonna lose money and I can't get into my career path because of XYZ. Whereas like a kiddo that's in first or second grade, you know, they're not paying out of pocket for things, but they also aren't fully developed yet to understand that, hey, school is important and, I have to get to the next grade to, continue my education. Kids just want to get the day over with, get home, play, nap, whatever it is now. Um, so yes, kids slash students may have motivators to get through the day or the school year, but I always look at the longer term, with like a scientific type of a thing, research over time sort of a thing. But yeah, again, it can vary for each individual. And I kind of pose a question to the people who are watching this that, might be able to comment or, you know, um, contribute to the conversation as well. Like, what motivates you, like on a day where you don't feel motivated, whether it's in school, work, or a combination, like what helps you?
That's a really good question. And I feel like for most of us it varies day to day. And I also think that we never stop, like as people, we don't stop to think about that because for a lot of action, like the motivation is the genesis of it. If you have a motivation to do the action, then you're going to do the action, and that leads to habits, that leads to routine, so on and so forth. But a lot of us never stop to think about, okay, what is my motivator? And I think that that's a big tweak that I think we can all make mentally to kind of go, okay, how do I shift from how do I get this thing done to what is my motivator to do it? I don't know if that makes any sense. Uh, Interestingly enough, my MBA program is uh, Indiana University, and their slogan is from moment to momentum. And I think that that's a huge part of motivation that I think we don't realize is the or we don't really lend credence to is the momentum of life. I
I
know
know.
that personally, like when I'm doing well, it seems like everything I do works out. And even the things that don't work out, it's like whatever, it's just a slight ding. It's not really a big deal. When I'm doing poorly, when I haven't built up that momentum, oh, every failure just like hits like a ton. Um, and I think that we get into this point, especially with our motivation, where we're thinking about, okay, I need to be the person that I was that went to the gym every day and was rapidly climbing the ladder at work and was all of this. And you probably slip pretty far from that. When you start to think about that and you start to have that listlessness and wistfulness for the past, um, in all likelihood, we probably slip pretty far from that. And I think that rather than going from, okay, I'm going to be this person that I want to be, we should look for small wins. Like, hey, I did my stretches this morning. Or rather than let things sit in the sink, I put them in the dishwasher right away. Something like that. There's a comedian, Pete Holmes, who said that the secret to happiness is redefining what a miracle is and just lowering your expectations there. And I think it's the same with motivation. This is just my opinion, but I think it's the same where if we can say, hey, my objective is to do this, and I currently have the motivation to do that because then I will feel accomplished. It's easier to build that momentum. And I think once you have that momentum, the motivation carries itself.
Definitely. And, I also think back to personal experiences that I've had, and I've definitely shared in previous podcasts, but, my dad was a, former bodybuilder, and, growing up, I always kind of followed him in the gym. And, once I became, of age to go to the gym, and train with him and things like that, he certainly had his way of motivating me, which, so every parent's different of how they, motivate, especially when it's a gym setting. So I remember doing bench press, my late high school years, and it was when I first really started getting into more of the, I'll say, the competitive side of lifting itself. And we have a few different members in our family. So myself, dad, my brother, and mom. So he's like, all right, do a rep for your brother, do a rep for mom. And, he'd always wait till the very last rep where I'm like struggling. He's like, do one for me. Come on, save me. Like I'm falling off the bridge or the building. And I'm like, and I'm done with the set. And I look at him, I'm like, why do you do that? He's like, because that's your motivator. And I'd always think, even as like a teenager, like, does that motivate me or not? So going into the mental health field, you think about even some childhood experiences that you have, and maybe parents, aunts, uncles, things that are said to you of, what's meant to be a motivator, but can kind of deter you from that motivation. Um, but then you'll also kind of think of, okay, maybe I'm carrying those values not just into my life, but if, having children, would I pass those as well to them? So I just wanted to kind of leave that as a topic as well for discussion, since we're talking more about like what could work for somebody, and what doesn't. Like that, the first few times was funny, but then after a while, like in the gym, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, don't leave your life responsible in my hands if I can't make this rep. Thank you.
It actually reminds me of when I played hockey. One one of my coaches, I just hated. He was a jerk. Um, but he would just tell me to do things, and I wouldn't do them, or I would do them, but I would perform better when he told me to do things, and he always attributed it to his coaching expertise. And it was just because every time he talked to me, like I got really angry and was like, "Oh," like, and it was just pure rage that was the motivator. It wasn't whatever he was doing. It was always just that I was so mad at him for doing anything. And I think that, like, when we try to motivate externally, that's always the risk, is that we're getting wrong information back, where we're thinking that what we're doing is successful when maybe it's something else that we're doing that's causing the motivation.
I feel like what you just both mentioned relates heavily on the support system, right? Um, no matter what, like how positive or negative support system might you view it as um, definitely comes in handy. No matter what you're going through, in the sense of Aaron having the coach he hated, but was also a strong like backbone for him. And then same thing with Allie and her family, of her, the dad and the brother. Um, just having a big, strong support system that can also play into a motivation factor if you just keep on growing mindset.
Yeah, yeah. I always think about that as a future parent, about like, okay, if I can if I can instill anything in my son young, I would want to instill drive. Like I would want to instill the motivation to keep going and to improve and be better and everything. Because I think over time, that's really what gets people. I think if you like, we all have this impression that the people that we view as successful are, you know, super smart or super talented or whatever. And to an extent that's true, but I think a lot of it is just, hey, they have the drive to continue building on whatever they're building on, and in some cases to sacrifice other things in order to do so. Which I think is something that we we tend to miss a lot as well, is that like achievement does require sacrifice a lot of times, especially when you're talking about like high levels of achievement. Um, and I think, when when we're younger, we tend to get this version of the world where you can have it all, like there's a happy ending where everything works out and everything. And for me personally, especially like when I got out of high school and got into my first try at college, um, there was this idea that I could do it all, that I could have it all. And I think that when you run into that wall of like, no, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, it becomes a huge demotivator that a lot of us either never recover from, or it takes us, months, years even, to recover from it. But with that being said, have either of you ran into this kind of realization that everything isn't possible? You kind of have to pick and choose what you want to focus on, and how did you deal with it?
I'm thinking more into that, Aaron. Ali, I'll let you, if you have that answer.
I have kind of an answer, but since you're thinking, I'll kind of chime in here. Well, for me at least, when it comes to like the motivation, like I said, I'm a very busy type of a person. I prefer my schedule being crazy and chaotic than maybe doing one thing or nothing, because that's just how I thrive. But certainly we have motivating factors for everything that we do. And I always say a motivating factor is a goal, right? Like we're not
Mm-hmm.
doing something just to do it. We're doing it for a reason. We're
Yeah.
investing our time, thoughts, money, feelings, whatever it is, we have a goal that we're driving towards, right? So, at least for me, again, I don't think about what I do. I just do it because if I get, halted in my tracks and I look at the big picture, I'm like, whoa, like this is a lot, maybe somebody doesn't have such a high threshold as I, or, you know, um, maybe there's one thing happening that's really stressing me out, and then the other things are just kind of keeping me, motivated to keep going, right? So I think too, I believe, Aaron, it was your point earlier, you accumulate things over time and it just becomes a part of your routine, right? Now we're not putting our 100%, I guess, into the one thing. Like for me, like when it comes to I always think of the gym with everything. So for me, like I'm not just going out and running every day, maybe running is something I'm doing one or two times a week because I don't want to burn out with that. A few other days a week I'm doing the Stairmaster. So it's like I'm motivated to do all the activities that I want to do to feel physically good, but I won't do everything all in one day, right? Like I kind of have a schedule. I have a cycle of this day. And hey, maybe my body doesn't feel like going on the stair mill for 30, 40 minutes on one day. And I would prefer to run because it's a nicer day out. It's not raining, it's not too hot. So it's more of just kind of listening to yourself to feel that motivation, but then also keeping it a part of whatever your routine or schedule is.
Mine, I would say I would go back to my past, right? Being brought up in a third world country, and where I am today, there's a lot of privilege that I've gained. So when that time occurs of me not wanting to do anything hard, or difficult, I always go back in the past of like, there's people out there, struggling just to have food or shelter. Um, what makes you uh, such a laziness? What makes you so lazy not to do something hard? That's the best way I can put it. So I definitely, every single time when there's something hard or difficult that needs to happen, I put myself in the past, and think about my upbringing, um, and go from there.
That brings up a really good point. Um, during during a crisis of faith that I had in spirituality, um, I read the Bhagavad Gita. Please let me know if I'm mispronouncing it.
Yeah.
Um, but there was, because I'm just like trying to find something that makes sense to me at the time. I was, I don't know, maybe a junior in high school. Um, but I remember there was this line that I like, it stayed with me. Most of it I forget, but there was this line that stayed with me. There was something like to the labor you are entitled, not the spoils. Um, and like when when you're talking about that, the perspective of like, hey, be grateful and keep moving because you have this opportunity, you need to seize on it. I wonder about um the origin of cultural motivation and what that looks like. Um, like people in the US, in certain circles, people talk about like the Puritan work ethic, and how great that is. But also, Puritans don't exist anymore for the most part. So, what is the trade-off for that cultural motivation? I know, like for Japanese people, there's this, hey, work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard, and I don't think it's the case anymore. But for like a decade, Japan had the highest suicide rate in the world because so many people were just burning out. Um, and so I'm interested in your thoughts on cultural motivation, like uh what the internal culture does for your motivation or even against it.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for bringing that up. And one of the main like key points that Bhagavad Gita focuses on is like selflessness and karma, right?
Mhm.
Where you're called to fulfill your duty selflessly without attachment to any results. Um, and I abide, not necessarily because of what the book said. I think this, again, just experience in life, of karma, and just being selfless and not having anything to do with like action without attachment, right? Um, so I think that's karma is very big in the sense of motivation, where uh, I feel like karma is also a big word for a lot of people of what it means. Like Ellie and Aaron, like what's karma for you, right? What does it mean to you?
I can go first. I mean, I think culturally, at least in the West, it's this idea that you do bad stuff's going to happen to you. You do good stuff's going to happen to you. Um, I know that from a from a religious perspective, it's more about the cycle of uh, life and rebirth, um, and what that looks like. But I do I do think culturally we would all be a lot better off if people just internalize the concept of karma. Um, and good stuff leads to good things, and bad stuff leads to bad things.
I agree with that.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much on point. So I feel like karma and motivation also goes hand in hand. Um, where like exactly what Aaron said, like you do good stuff in life, you'll achieve good stuff, and that's the motivation for me or whoever it is out there. And then if you want to do bad stuff, that's the motivation for you to keep on doing bad stuff, or be lazy, whatever it is. That's
Mhm.
your demons, I should say.
So that reminds me of a story from, I think it's like the 70s. There was an Olympic athlete who, uh, maybe it was the 80s, because it was when the Olympics was like steroids are a no-go. People can't use steroids anymore. But there was an Olympic athlete who did a ton of steroids, one did nothing to try and fool the committee or anything, and then got his Olympic medals stripped. Um, and like they asked him, like, why would you do this? You had to know you were going to get caught. And he was like, well, I just wanted to stand on the podium one time.
Mm.
And that always, especially in the terms of motivation, that always captures me when I think about that, because it's a bad thing and it led to his disgrace, but at the same time, like that motivation caused him to achieve his goals in a very weird way, but he seemed undisturbed by it. I don't know. It's one of those things where I just kind of conceptualize the grayness of life. Like we tend to look at things in black and white. Like motivation is good, not being motivated is bad, but there's always a gray area. So I feel like I brought the whole room down. Everybody's like, yeah, it's dark. Um, oh, with
Well,
that, I do think it's important for us to kind of recognize where our own personal motivation is, um, and recognize also what is a motivational inhibitor. Um, like one of the things that I think I can't say sustains because it is still a very hard culture, but works in the Japanese culture is that work hard goes with play hard. You know, like people are always they're very committed to their relaxation and to their leisure, and they're very committed to, you know, their recreational activities. And so, you know, like I'll see Japanese people and, you know, they're just chilling. They're taking some time to take a nap. They're resting. They're whatever, and then they're up and out and at 'em. And I think that that that's something that we also don't consider is the importance of recreational activity, the importance of the non-productive time.
I agree with that, Aaron. And that kind of brings up as well, like with my childhood upbringing, right? Because I was involved in a lot of sports and, I played a lot of different instruments. So I just remember my dad bringing me to like my guitar lessons on a Thursday evening and, saying like, yeah, like once the work is done and you do what you have to do, then you can enjoy, then comes the cartoons or, your TV show or, whatever it is that, you want to do because, um, even seeing as an adult, like I was mentioning earlier, like if I'm sitting trying to relax, just concentrate on whatever the leisure activity is, and I know that there's pending tasks in the house, like I don't feel like I can fully relax until said chore or, assignment or task is done of me. I have to get it done before I, can really fully indulge in, okay, like there's nothing else, to do. So, um, yeah, that just made me think of that when you were speaking. But it's also kind of like a therapy thing, right? Like I think a lot of people, listening might also start to kind of unravel, like it doesn't have to be all of your habits, but even just some of your day-to-day things. Like you might tomorrow get in the car and turn on the ignition or turn the key and say, whoa, like thinking about my day, you know, this is my reason why, or maybe you don't know your reason why yet. So you can start to kind of plant those seeds and discover more things about yourself. And you might even find more motivating factors. So,
On
Absolutely.
that
I think
point, go for it, Aaron.
no, no, no. I'm just gonna ramble. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say on that point, do you guys think like visualization, like I feel like it's like a myth that says like success, visualizing success will lead to success, and there's on the other end, science says like visualizing success won't get you there. So for you guys, do you guys think visualizing is a good thing?
Well, I have opinions. Um, so years ago, I don't know if you guys have heard of the book The Secret, but it was like really popular like a decade or so ago. Um, and like there's some stuff in it where I'm like, okay, that's probably a good idea, and there's some stuff in it where I'm just like, That's so dumb. But I think one of the reasons why people saw that, possibility is working is that there is some sort of mental connection that comes from visualization. And it's not so much that, hey, if you visualize it, this stuff is going to come to you. It's that if you're constantly thinking about it, you're constantly going to be doing something to bring that about. If you're constantly envisioning what brings you there, then you're going to start taking those steps naturally. It's like, when to bring it back to hockey again, when I was playing hockey, uh, I was always taught you don't need to look at the puck, you don't need to look at the stick, look at where they're looking, because where they're looking is where they're going. And it's the same thing. Like where you're looking is where you're going. Where you're visualizing is where you're going. So I think that is very powerful, but I also think that a lot of people tend to miss out on the doing thing part of it. Where they're like, "Oh, I can just visualize and I can create a vision board, and then all this stuff is going to come to me because I've created a vision board." And like, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. That seems ridiculous to me. Um, but the power of looking in the direction that you want to go constantly is very, it's there. It's real. No.
No. I was gonna say, Ali, anything on your end with the myth and science for psychology
No,
on what we just
no,
talked about?
no, I mean, I have to say, I mean, again, when it comes for me, actually, like with psychology, right? Like every person's different, as a clinician, we meet people where they are, with whatever it is that they're, trying to become motivated towards, but are currently motivated with. We can, work with a person on exploring how they can become more motivated in their day to day. But there's no like one size fits all answer, as to what works for someone or what doesn't. It's just about that self-discovery and kind of going back earlier to like reward systems and things, I say to like things in moderation, right? Because hey, if we're giving our child an iPad to play with an hour a day, maybe that's not the best motivator. Maybe it's signing them up for an extracurricular activity because that'll promote a different lifelong, skill building or some sort. So again, you know, I can't like give a full clinical answer because, everybody's different. We're all different, even in this room of things that motivate us or don't motivate us. So yeah, I'll kind of leave it with that.
Very well said. And then
Your
go for it, Aaron. Go for it.
I think your response
No.
brings up something that we talk about a lot, and I can't overemphasize it, is the importance of personal reflection. I think what happens to so many of us when we feel unmotivated or we feel trapped or whatever is our reflection isn't really internal, it's external, where we're looking at everything around us and saying, why am I not happy with all of these things around us, rather than looking internal and saying, hey, what am I doing? Where am I at? What motivates me? What type of person am I? And being very clear about that internally. Because I found, and I will say that everybody that has done that internal reflection work, I find in general is much more motivated than the people who have not done that internal reflection work. Um, I think that, there's obviously going to be cases where that's not true. Some people who are just have whatever motivation, but in general, I think it's just so important for us to have done that internal work and determine who we are, what works for us, what doesn't work for us, you know, and be able to build on that, because a lot of us, if we're honest with ourselves, I don't think we know the answers to those questions. Sorry, you were saying, Robbie?
No, I was gonna say, if you had to wrap up, right? I'll ask. I mean, I'll start off with you, and then Ali, and I can go as well. Like, so what works and what doesn't for you, Aaron?
I mean, what works for me personally is absolutely my family. Like I am 1,000 times more likely to do something if it's going to yield a positive impact on my family versus for me or anyone else for that matter. Um, but that's an external motivator. I think it's also this sense of being the person that you want to be versus the person that you think you are, because that's an ongoing process, and I think we're tested daily on whether or not we're taking steps toward that or away from that. And sometimes admittedly, we take steps away from that. But if we can kind of focus on, hey, I want to be this person, I want to act like this person, I want to represent these things, um, we increase our chances of success. And I think that that's very important for me. Like I want to be somebody who, encourages others, that motivates others, empowers others. Um, and it's kind of hard to be that person if you can't do it for yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely, like loved ones for me motivate me. Communication as well, motivates me. Like if I'm not in communication with like people that and again, this is the external or extrinsic motivation here, but you know, those people will keep me accountable, right? Like if I'm and I'm not like a social media person by any means, but like if people see that I'm doing well, like, hey, keep going, that's motivating, it's helpful. But it all does stem really with me from within, right? Again, just from my upbringing of, you know, do the things that, you have to do, right, to survive, but the things that you enjoy, the gym, like when I go to the gym and I come home, I feel like I've accomplished something. So that sense of accomplishment also brings the motivation and vice versa. I'm somebody who I always preach about don't give up, and it's hard, it's difficult. So, sometimes that is your why, you know, just not to let, yourself give into negativity, things like that, and not giving up on whatever it is. But for me, what I guess what doesn't work is, if I'm pushed, like do this or, something's going to happen. And I get that from the bench press example. But yeah, Ravi, I'll pass it to you.
I think similar to what you guys mentioned in terms of family. I think for me, it's like just seeing anyone around me who's close to me just happy. I think that takes care of it all in the sense of motivation. I'm like, okay, as long as everyone, like my friends or whatever it is, like I see them, I connect with them. It's very motivating to me to do better. So which is a nice thing. And then what doesn't, I would say, it's the competition aspect where you're in the sense of you have to do better than this person or you have to do better than that person. Um, I think that doesn't motivate me. Where it's just like if it's not a natural thing for me to do, I'm not gonna put my energy towards it. Um, so yeah.
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 I think that like we all have different motivators, but Ali, you brought up something that I wanted to bring up, and the conversation just kind of brought me away from it. But accountability, I think, is huge. Um, I think that that's another thing that a lot of us tend to overlook. Like we all really don't like accountability because it means that we could get in trouble if we're accountable. But accountability, I think, is crucial for building results and for making sure that the motivation sticks, you know? And it doesn't have to be, hey, if you don't do this, like you were talking about, if you don't do this, something bad is going to happen. It doesn't have to be that. But like, uh, I'll give you an example. If I screw something up at home that, my wife was really counting on me to do, and I did it wrong, like the look of disappointment in her eyes, oh, devastating. I will spend the rest of the day, couple days, whatever it is, trying to fix that because of like the level of accountability and the motivation that creates. And I think that a lot of times we'll create this short-term motivation because, hey, I can do this and I'm going to do this, but we don't necessarily build an accountability infrastructure to back us up when we run into the days where it's harder and we want to find excuses not to do it. Because I can speak from experience, and maybe the two of you can't, but excuses are everywhere. Like they're so easy to find. If you don't want to do something, it's so easy to come up with a reason not to do it. Uh, Absolutely insane how easy it is to come up with a reason not to do it. But I think that having, some sort of structure of accountability, it doesn't necessarily need to be, uh, somebody yelling at you or somebody super disappointed in you, but just some sort of way for you to note, hey, I didn't hit my target today, or I didn't do the thing that I wanted to do today. And then I think also a structure for forgiveness for that. Like I had a friend who, if she had the momentum, she could do anything. She would knock out an entire to-do list in a few hours and just be nonstop productive. But once she missed once, like she lost that momentum, and then it was like, oh well, I missed this. What's the point of the rest of this? Because she kind of couldn't forgive herself. So I think that's also very important, is being able to look at what you've done and what you failed to do and say, hey, I missed it this time. There'll be other bites at the apple. There'll be other shots. Sorry, Ali, I'm very interested in your thoughts on forgiveness because I know that that's a huge kind of therapy thing. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, I even say too, like sometimes if we don't meet our goal, or what that motivating factor was at first, like just because we don't meet a goal on the first try around doesn't mean that we can't have motivation to try again or, um, go for something different, maybe a little bit similar to whatever that goal was. So it is ultimately about forgiving ourselves. And, sometimes it's hard to digest and say, I'm not a failure, I'm not a loser, I'm not, a quitter. But it's just re-strategizing and finding what that new motivating factor could be. And that's why I always say, like, speaking with someone, whether it's a trusted family member, a professional contact of support, like it can certainly help you, with unraveling like why it might be hard to forgive yourself or listing the reasons why it disrupted you so much. But you're right, Aaron. It is very important about forgiving and forgiveness of ourselves and others. So
yeah. So unfortunately, we are closed out of time. I feel like I could continue this conversation for the rest of the day because motivation, to me, it's at the key of what we're doing. I know everybody tends to view everything in terms of, do I know enough? Am I an expert enough? Do I have the skills? And in my experience, and please push back if you disagree, but I think behavior is a much better predictor of success than talent in the long term. In the short term, absolutely, talent's going to beat out behavior. But in the long term, I think those who develop the right behavioral mechanisms and the right skills um, to repeat positive behaviors tend to go further and do more than those who just have talent. Um, but yeah, with that being said, thank you both so much for joining me on this. It was a great conversation, and we got to have it again and kind of continue this at some other point. Um, but we'll do that later. Thank you for everybody for watching, either now or in the future. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Check out Lamco Wellness, our sponsors. They do stuff like this all the time. So thank you, everybody. See ya.
Thank you. Bye bye.